What happens when a movie can't seem to get out of first gear? Hello and welcome to Rotted Review of the Day, and today I am taking a look at the 2018 movie The Perfect Host, A Southern Gothic Tale. For me, after having watched this movie, this seemed like a fairly strong setup that never really figured out how to break away from the line, and what it wound up being was an hour and 33 minutes that felt like a very, very long hour and 33 minutes. This was a halfway decent concept, but if I had to really name where it really fell down, it is really difficult to avoid the... I don't like singling people out. I really don't. I try to rise above that, but the writing, the directing, and the editing were the major components that I think really failed on this movie, and this was written, directed, and edited by a single person, Derek Sims. So, I mean, draw your own conclusion on that one, how I feel about the performance there. But regardless, let's get into more detail by getting into the categories. As always, 4 different categories, each one worth up to 25 points for a total possible score of 100 points. And the plot, I gave a 6 out of 25. This followed the character of Julie and her young daughter. She has been estranged from home, but her grandma passes away, and when she goes to the funeral, she has nowhere to stay, but then winds up bumping into a friend of her grandmother's who was also visiting the gravesite, Francis. And she invites them to, hey, we have a really big house, and, we need some voices in there, so if you just need a place to stay for a couple of days, by all means. So she winds up taking her up on it. And it seems like Frances and her husband, there's just a little bit more under the surface there, and some creepy elements start coming out, and Julie meets up with her old boyfriend, Jonathan, and the movie just kind of really just rambles from there more than anything else. The rest of it, I'm not going to give away any spoilers, but it really doesn't seem to want to go anywhere of any real critical importance. Like I said, this just really never got out of first gear with character development, with dialogue, and especially with pacing. And when we're talking about character development and dialogue, we're talking about the writing. When we're talking about the pacing, we're talking about the editing. It really lacked any depth to it. The characters themselves were never brought past a singular dimension. The character of Julie was morose and withdrawn, and that's all she was throughout the entire movie. The character of Frances was sweet in a creepy kind of way. That's all she was throughout the entire movie. Her daughter was pretty much barely there. She was physically there, but there was just so much nondescript going on. None of the characters really popped. So there was really nobody in this movie that I was able to really get behind and follow through with and latch onto as a protagonist to draw me into the film. And more than that, there was just little actually happening that kept my interest outside of the characters. So really, as the plot was written, 6 out of 25. I really couldn't give it any higher than that. And the intent, I gave a 5 out of 25. I really think this believed that it had more interesting characters than it wound up having. I really believe that it was trying to be scary. And it really just kind of failed on all counts. There was 1 or 2 halfway decent little creep moments in the background, but those were fleeting. And ultimately kind of led nowhere of any real significance. So whatever the movie was intending, I really have a feeling that it didn't live up to it at all. The acting, I gave an 11 out of 25, and this is one that I kind of struggled with a little bit, just because the fact that the characters didn't pop, I really have a feeling was more the source material than the performances of the actors. Suelima Rodriguez did a fairly decent job as Julie, but everybody in this movie was, first of all, almost all the dialogue was one line back and forth, and a lot of it was questions. If you've ever seen Whose Line Is It Anyway, and they do the bit where they can only ask each other questions, that was how this movie felt. How are you doing? How should I be doing? Well, Are you enjoying your stay? Well, why do you ask? And it ultimately wound up being a whole lot of dialogue that had absolutely no meat, information, or character development or richness to it at all. So the actors, I think, were kind of stymied. How could they really deliver solid performances when they were only given singular lines of dialogue that had no range, depth, or any meat on them at all? So, it's difficult to judge the performances, but giving the benefit of the doubt and also weighing everything together, I think I landed in a place of about 11 out of 25. The technical, I gave a 17 out of 25. This was actually shot beautifully. This had great angles, great camera work. The soundtrack was pretty good, going on in the background there. Cinematography was on point with this one. This was, I'm not going to say it was a beautiful movie, but it felt very professional, very polished, and big budget. This is absolutely not where the movie fell down. The technical portions of this one were good. And that gives us a total of 39 out of 100 points. Ultimately, I just think this is one to pass on. It wound up, in my opinion, just being an hour and 33 minutes of a superficial snoozer. I wish that it had gone deeper. I wish that it had fleshed out the characters more. It seemed like they were operating on having some backstory. They had some history there going on, certainly, but it never really explored it. It never really brought it to a believable or third dimension level. And it's just a shame, because I really think that somewhere in here was a halfway decent movie that just needed a little bit of TLC to really come forth. It really needed a richness brought to it that just wasn't. So that should about do it. That's my review of 2018's The Perfect Host, A Southern Gothic Tale. I really thank you for joining me here today. Look forward to seeing you tomorrow. Remember, next time you want to watch a horror movie, first make sure that it's good and rotted.